All right, everybody. Wanted to take an opportunity to show you some of the improvements and updates to our herbascript Medicinary formula writing software. As many of you have probably noticed, there's some layout changes to the way the system looks and some changes to the core builders. We had an update that rolled out about 10 days ago, and so we are working through all of the changes and making sure everything works well, and wanted to talk to you guys about some of the exciting new changes that have happened. So the landing on the dashboard is largely the same as before, and on the left-hand side is still the primary navigation. But as many of you will have noticed, inside the build formula section, there's now a variety of breakdowns where before there was just granule herbs and bulk herbs. Now we have granule broken down, or the formula system broken down into four major types. So the granule builder, let's take a look at that first. The granule builder is largely unchanged from previous systems. The only difference is that you'll notice a little bit more straightforward flow with text and material and explainers that kind of work through section by section. So if you've not written a granule formula before or you're new to the system, my recommendation is to really take it section by section and just sort of read the basic information in each section, which will kind of walk you through what the expectation is. So just as before, you'd choose a patient that you might want to write a formula for, and then you need to give that formula a name. One of the important changes in the system is that names are now unique, right? And so what that means is that if you write a formula called names are now unique, that formula name can't be used again for another patient. And for someone like myself, I've written formulas using the same kinds of names. I'll have a soothe and circulate that I've written for a dozen different patients. But the system now is organized so that the search for a formula name will pull up a unique formula connected to a unique patient. And so if you are in the habit of using similar formula names as I have been, instead of typing just, soothe and circulate and then say giving it a number based on the iterations, right? So patient Kermit got soothe and circulate 1, then it became soothe and circulate 2, and then it got modified into soothe and circulate 3. Now, in order to keep those names unique, you'll want to put some sort of item in here that connects it specifically to that patient, so it creates a unique formula name. So my solution has been to just use the patient's initials. So in this case, KF-soothe and circulate 1, but you could literally put anything you want. You could put a unique number, you could put a unique marker. It doesn't matter, just something that creates a unique formula name. So if you find yourself stuck up on formula names or it's giving you some trouble, it's because you need to create a unique name for each formula that you make. The easiest solution to do that systematically, if you like regular names as I do, is to just use something like the patient's initials. Once you move past that, you'll see the next section showing you the general details of how your formula is organized. In the granule builder, there's only granules that you have an option to include, so there's really nothing to do here except recognize that you're in the granule builder, and that currently the quantity being calculated for your formula, the quantity that your patient will receive, is 112 grams. Where is that coming from? That is coming from this section, the dosage information section, where you are telling the software, I want my patient to take 8 grams, right, twice a day for 7 days. And that math is 112 grams. This is the core genius of the herbascript dispensary system, right? Is that many of our builders that rely on specific daily dosage allow you to set that dosage at the top, and then it makes writing the formula very easy on the back end. So in this case, we are writing a granule formula. Most of our patients here, for example, take 16 grams a day, so that's 18 grams twice a day. If I was making a formula for 14 days, though, if I change this number to 14, you'll now see that the total amount calculated is 224 grams, which will also have changed here in the quantity received. So if, for example, though, you just don't want to use the calculation system and you're like, I just want to give my patient 100 grams of this formula. I don't care how much they're taking per day. I'm just giving them 100 grams. They can take 6 grams one day, 10 grams another day, whatever you're doing with your dosage. You can override this by just changing this number to 100, right? And all the math that we'll look at in a second will always be predicated off of this section, right? So even though when you set these numbers, let's put it back to 7, it's going to do the math and fill in this box. If you change it, if you come in here and override this number, that's the amount of herb that will be in the bag that your patient gets. My recommendation is to let it do the math. I think it's a much more straightforward way to get the dosing material to your patient in the way that you want, it also makes your formula writing a lot easier, which is what I'll show you. But if you've got a different system, then you can always use it here. Once you set your dosage, in this case, 8 grams twice a day for 7 days, right? Right below that, we have a discussion about mixing and consumption instructions. This is a small piece of information, like say something like take away from medications or mix grams with hot water and stir to dissolve. If you have something that's more than 100 characters, like some great details about how you want the patient to prepare their granules, it's not usually as relevant in granules as it is, say, with bulk, but if it's something more elaborate, this isn't the place to put it. This is the basic information that's going on the label. It's limited to 100 characters, so that way it'll actually fit on the label. And it's just something straightforward like mix a number of grams with hot water, start to dissolve, right? If you don't want to include any special instructions, you can uncheck it. If you're doing a system where you don't care about the exact dosage for the day, you can uncheck this box, and then that won't print on the label, and you can just come here and set the dosage amount that you want the system to do the math on. So you have a lot of control over ultimately what happens to the patient or what the patient sees. In my opinion, and what I would recommend is that you stick with dosage information on the label so that the patient knows what they're getting. You set your days, let the system do the math for you. And then if you have some specific information about how they should take their granules, like say take away from meals, then you would add it in here. Next up is the actual piece itself of building out your formula. Now you'll notice here that there's quite a lot of columns that are visible here, right? Pinyin, English, the herb quantity that's going to go in, the number of days, percentage. You can control all of these columns, right? So like in my case, when I usually write a formula, I just have the pinyin, right? Because I don't need the English. That's not how I'm going to search for it. But if you do, you can. You can also add a column with Chinese character. You can add a column with Latin pharmaceutical name. You can remove the columns just so that you can see what you need to see. If you're going to write a formula, you come in here and you say, okay, I would just like to write this patient Guizhitang. And so I'm going to put in all of my ingredients here for Guizhitang. And once I have everything in place, then I'm going to go ahead and put in my dosages. Now, if you're used to having to do this math yourself, you'd have to figure out like, okay, well, 112 grams of herbs because they're taking it for 7 days. In this case, I said 12 days, so I actually need 192 grams. So how do I figure out how much of each herb I need? You don't need to do that. The joy of this system is that you can come in here and you can type in whatever dosage information you're going to use for a single day's worth of classic bulk, right? So just, whatever it is that you might write, when I write a Guizhitang, this is generally how I write it. Um, but this is a system that lets you write it however you want. Now, when I type in these numbers, you can see that these are the dosage that I would give someone if they were taking this in one day of bulk. But then if I come over here, I can see that actually this is happening over 12 days. And the real amount that's going to be in the bag of Guizhar is 51 grams. The real amount of Baishao is 51 grams. The real amount of Zhigansao is 38 grams. This math is calculated on the total number of days at the dosage you set, and the way that this number that you typed in is a percentage of the total formula. It's very interesting math. What I can tell you is that what this allows you to do is maintain the alchemical ratios of ingredients in a formula with you just deciding how much herb you want the patient to take, and then the system will do the math for you. So you don't have to do any math, right? You don't have to do any math in order to figure out how much of each ingredient you need to write. You just need to decide how much does the patient need to take, and that's going to depend on their constitution, the thing you're working on, their age, their robustness, all this sort of stuff. For us, most of our patients take 8 grams twice a day. But we have people doing 6 grams twice a day, got people doing 12 grams 3 times a day. It really just depends. It doesn't matter what my dosage is in the end. I'm not going to change these numbers. If I'm sitting here thinking about it and I say, well, I said 8 grams twice a day for 12 days, but actually I think they're going to need more than that because, it's a cold and flu thing. I actually want them to do it for not as many days. Let's say it's really just for 5 days, but I want them to do 12 grams over 3 days. Like here I am messing with all these inputs. And every time I change that, the system is changing the total amount of herb that your patient's going to get, which means when I scroll back down here, I'm going to see my input numbers didn't change, but the number of days did. And so now the amount of each of those ingredients that's in the formula is also going to change. So again, all you need to do is know what would I write for this patient for 1 day in bulk, right? You can think of it as a Bensky dosage, as a Chen dosage if you're using standards. The the Shanghan Lun doses are all set up as sort of 1 day doses. So you can just use those numbers, right? And think of them essentially as ratios to one another, and the software will do the math. While we're here, we've set this up so you can see something that occasionally happens. In this case, the Datsao is showing as out of stock in the system, and that's because we've used it and there isn't any on the shelf at the moment. At Root and Branch, we make herb orders every week. So usually when something's out of stock, it'll be back in stock on Thursday of whatever week it is. So if you see this out of stock marker on a Friday, probably it's not going to be back in stock until Thursday the next week. If you see it on a Tuesday, it'll probably be in on that Thursday. However, you can place an order with an out of stock item, but it may not be able to be filled same day, which is our usual process if it shows out of stock. For anything that's out of stock, you're unsure what the status of it is, you can always give us a call, 971-288-5939. We're 9 to 4 Pacific, Monday through Friday, and someone on the phone will be able to give you a better estimate. But that's the usual process, right? So restocked herbs on Thursdays. In this case, we're just going to proceed, assuming that, we know that's coming in and it's not super urgent. So we're going to move forward, leaving this herb in place. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and it's going to show me a little summary. There's 5 ingredients in the formula. The total amount that I entered manually myself was 45 grams. But of course, because of the math, it's going to spit out 180 grams. And the subtotal for that formula is 38.77. Okay. It's a good way to just make sure that this lines up with what you were expecting. Preparation details is if you have something that you wanted them to do specifically about the herbs, right? I want you to mix it with hot water and then pour in cool water, and then I want you to add a slice of ginger and 2 squeezes of lemon. Detailed preparation instructions, that information goes here, and that'll show up on the info sheet that the patient will get from us with their formula. If there's any add-on services, in the case of granules, if you want us to send the little plastic spoon that many people use for granules, that's a 10-cent fee, and you can just click this box and we'll send it with the formula. It's important to remember that there is no direct relationship between the volume of the spoon and the weight that it holds. Granule density varies by company, by ingredient, and so every time that you write a formula and you say 8 grams twice a day for 7 days or whatever, we're going to make sure to weigh out 8 grams in a little plastic spoon, and we're going to write that on the info sheet and on the bag of herbs so that your patient will know for this formula, 8 grams is 5 level spoons, or 8 grams is 6 level spoons, or 8 grams is 3.5 level spoons, because it can vary quite a lot. And the reason that we do that is because if the patient's expecting the formula to last for 7 days, and they erroneously assume, for example, that 1 gram is 1 level spoon, and they take 8 grams, they take 8 level spoons, they're going to be taking too much herb at once, which may or may not have a physical effect, but it will certainly mean that they run out of herbs early. And that's not what they were expecting. And so we need to make sure that their expectations match with the outcomes and that they're getting the right dosage. So you don't need to worry about any relationship between spoon and weight. We're going to take care of that for you. But if you want them to have a spoon, click this box. Refills, you can set refills. We usually recommend, most people are doing like 3 refills with no days in between and usually out, say like 120 days. You can pick a date. You can set this up so that it defaults to whatever numbers you like over here in your settings. So if you go to settings and you go to formula settings, you go to granules, you can set up your refill settings so it automatically populates. You don't have to worry about it. In this case, this patient would have the ability to refill this formula 3 times. And we set it to 0 days in between. And what we mean by that is that if they wanted to order more than 1 refill, they could. If you set this to say 5 days in between, it means they'd only be able to order 1 refill every 5 days. So it would limit the ability to order refills. Some people want to do that to keep their patients on a certain pacing. A lot of folks, though, they'll write a formula for a week for the patient to try it out, and then they want the patient to reorder 2 or 3 weeks of it. If this is set to anything other than 0, they won't be able to order more than 1 refill at a time. So just keep that in mind. In this section, you can choose a markup option. Many of our practitioners add a markup to their orders. Many of the times it's by a fixed amount, so a lot of our practitioners will just add a $4 markup. What happens here is that we're going to collect that $4 from the patient. Their order will be $4 more expensive. They won't see it as a markup, right? In the end, they'll just see the final price right here at $42.77. We'll collect it and we'll hold it for you. And when it's over $50, you can request it as a cash out, and we will set you up with QuickBooks and a direct deposit, and we'll put that money right into your bank account, less the credit card transaction fee. which is 3%. And if it's over $150 of credit, we're going to cash it out for you because I like to get that stuff off my books when I can. So you can add any markup or no markup. You can do it as a fixed amount. You can set it as a percentage. I'd like to do 15%, whatever it is. And you'll be able to see like, okay, here was the ingredients, here's my markup, here's the total price. This is all the patient will see. They will not see your markup. They won't know that it's been marked up, and that markup will persist from refill to refill. So you have the choice whether you want to include that or not. We usually recommend a modest markup for most people, so that way they can make some direct cash off of their prescription process. And usually something between $3 and $7 is well absorbed by most patients. And that's a way that you can add a little bit of actual revenue to your bottom line from the work that you're doing. This last section before we add it to the cart is instructions for the dispensary. And this situation, the circumstances around what's happening in the dispensary's instruction set, if you want to tell us something, right, about this formula, patient's going to be late, patient's coming at a different time, this isn't the section that I would recommend it for. This is something you need us to know about preparation that you couldn't communicate in the other circumstances. And oftentimes, this information is in fact visible to the patient because we print it on info sheets and the info sheet goes out with the patient. So we want you to make sure that you're putting information in here that you're not worried that the patient can see, right? If you need to communicate with us directly about something, a private message about something that you don't want the patient to see, we'll show you where to do that in another section. So once you're satisfied with the formula, you don't have any notes to send us, you're just going to click Add to Cart. And that's going to put your formula directly into your cart, which it'll show you here, right? It'll show you who it's for, give you a quick summary. You can see the markups. We didn't have any fees added. And then you can take it through the checkout process. We're going to add a couple of different formulas from each of the builders in here so you can see kind of how they all work. And then once those are all in place, we'll go through the checkout process. All right. So let's take a look at what it is to build a bulk formula inside the updated builder. On the left-hand side, if you click Build Formula, you'll see that there's three options for working with bulk or raw herbs, depending on what you call them. So these are whole herbs compared to granules, right? And basically, we've broken out three different types of builders that make it easy for the medicinary to understand what it is that you're trying to end up with in the end, and to ask you all the right questions so we have all the necessary information. So let's start with the most classic version of getting a bulk herbal formula, which is to have it packaged in bags. This is the sort of classic Chinese way of getting a bulk formula. It's several different bags that have herbs in them, and a patient takes them home and cooks them at home, boils them into a decoction or a tea. So let's take a look at what it is to build something like that. So when you click the bulk and bags option, you have very similar details as we had for any of the other builders at the top. But one of the differences is that you have a choice in what we call the dosage mode. Are you going to write this formula doing the math by the day, or are you going to do this, create this formula doing the math by the bag? Most of the time, people are doing their math by the day. That is to say, I'm going to write a formula in an amount by day, and then the system will multiply that total amount of herb needed based on the total number of days prescribed. We'll look at both versions and kind of talk about the pros and cons. So let's start with the most common in formula per day. So when I scroll down here, I can see that we've got some options here to include, to show you kind of what is happening with this formula. So if we're doing the math by day, as it says here, you're currently dosing by the day, there's still some other questions we need to answer. First and foremost, how many days do we want of this formula? If you're taking it for a week, it'd be 7 days. If it's something different, it'd be 5 days. Maybe it's something long term, it's 12 days. No matter what number of days you're going to pick, the other question we want to know is how many bags do you want the patient to receive? Remember, you're doing the math by the day. So the question is, do you want the patient to have 7 days of herbs that's packed into 7 bags, meaning one bag is going to last for one day? Or do you want them to have 7 days worth of herbs that's packed into 2 bags, where each bag is going to have 3.5 days worth of herbs in it? Why does this matter? Well, it primarily matters based on patient compliance with cooking herbs. A lot of times people will write formulas in 7 days and 7 bags, expecting that the patient's going to cook herbs every day because they're looking to get the quote unquote freshest, value from their decoction. And maybe a patient will do that in the beginning or maybe for a while, but at some point in our experience, patients tend to burn out on cooking herbs every day. It's just an involved process, especially if you're doing a classic double boil. So we often recommend that people try and minimize the number of times the patient has to cook herbs in a given dosing period. So if you're writing a formula that's going to last for 7 days, a week's worth of herbs, just have us pack it up in 2 bags. That way the patient cooks twice in that 7 day period, and they can store the herbs in the refrigerator and reheat them as needed. And we recommend this a lot for patients, our own patients. We do decoction service ourselves. And I can tell you that we have not observed any kind of decline in potency by having people cook in this method. You could even have someone get 7 days worth of herbs in 1 bag and have them just cook those herbs one time, and they'll take them all 7 days in the fridge. We don't recommend going beyond 7 days. You will start to see some food spoilage or fermentation in cooked liquids that last in the fridge for more than 7 days. But 7 days is doable. So decide how you want to do this. Remember, you're writing the formula based on daily dosage, but you still need to tell us how many bags you want that daily dosage in, right? So let's go ahead and do it with 7 days in 2 bags, meaning the patient's going to end up with 2 bags of herbs, each bag therefore lasting 3.5 days. Okay. And of course, we'll put that information on the bag for the patient so they understand how long this bag of herbs is supposed to last. Next up, then, is dosage information. Remember, this is basic dosage information that's going to go on the label, not information about how to cook herbs. That's prep information that's going to come later. So, for example, maybe you're just telling the patient, look, I want you to take 8 ounces of finished decoction 2 times per day. So, we're going to just stick that in here. And that's what's going to show up on the label, right? So, they're going to have a bag of herbs because you told us how many bags and how many days. They'll know how many days they're supposed to get out of each bag. And then you're telling them how much finished decoction do you want them to take? 8 ounces, 12 ounces, 15 ounces, whatever. And that will affect, this decision will be based on how you do your cooking instructions. Bulk decoction is one of those places where people can get very, very particular, and also very, very generalized. And so it'll really just depend on your particular style. But this is where you want to put that basic information. Next up, then, we have our ingredients, right? So this is, again, the same situation like we had with any of the other builders where we're going to go ahead and write the formula. And in this case, because we're doing our math based on the day, right, we don't need to think about it in any other way. You'll notice, though, as I type this in here, that if I were making a classic Guizhitang, of course, Shengjang is part of that, and I go to type it and it's not there. Why not? It's because we don't keep fresh Shengjang in our pharmacy available for bulk and bag decoction. We keep it for decocting our own herbs in-house. But the reason we don't include it in people buying bagged herbs to send to patients is because it's fresh. Shengjang is fresh, it's not dry. And so if you put it into bags, it has a tendency to spoil, right? Particularly if we ship it during the hotter months in the year, it'll mold by the time it gets where it needs to go. And these days, you can find ginger in almost every American grocery store. And so usually what we do is we just recommend that folks tell their patients to add a couple of slices of ginger to the pot when they make their herbs. In many cases, the exact gram quantity of Shengjang in a formula doesn't matter all that much. If you're wanting to keep a rough idea of about how much Shengjang weighs, if 6 grams of Shengjang is about 3 slices, roughly the size of a person's thumbnail, right? So something like that will give you a rough idea. Think quarter-sized pieces that are 1/8 inch thick. 3 of those will get you 6 grams, no problem, right? So that's a good thing to keep in mind. So if you're looking for the patient to use Shengjang in any kind of formula where you're sending them bagged herbs, you're going to recommend that they get ginger from their grocery store because you won't be able to get it from us. If you're doing a decoction service, then Shengjang shows up as an option because it's available for that function, but not in any other one. So in this case, let's assume that you're going to have the patient get their ginger themselves. So you're going to go ahead and put in your dosing here. And now we can see that as I put in the daily dose, because remember, we're writing the formula by the day, I can see across here that it's calculating the math. So because we told the system we needed 7 days worth of herbs, 7 times 12 is 84, 84, 42, 63. You can see the math here. Also, if you go across the lines, you'll see that the price is showing you the price per gram of the specific herb, and then it's showing you the subtotal for that ingredient based on the amount that you'd actually get. So 5.5 cents a gram at 84 grams is $4.62. If you scroll across the line all the way here, you'll be able to see all of those details in the columns come across and see here, so we had the price, the subtotal, there's a total of 2 bags. And then importantly, at the end of the line here is an option for you to add a specific instruction for that herb. So let's say, for example, that you really wanted the cinnamon, the guajer, to be short boiled. If you tag this as a short boil herb, then we will package it specially with a little separate bag and a little separate tag that says short boil. And so when the patient gets the bag of herbs and they open it, they'll have all the herbs in a bundle and then the cinnamon in its own little short boil bag. This is the way to tell us about this, right? You have two options in the system currently. You have short boil or add at the end, and you have pre-boil. Sometimes you might see other services here, depending on what you're writing and what herbs you've chosen. Sometimes you might see dissolve at the end. No matter what kind of special prep you want your patient to do, if you want us to make sure to package it specially for them to be able to do that special prep, please make sure to tag the herbs appropriately. In this default spread, the herb ad is at the end of all of these columns, but you might see it somewhere else in this run, maybe right after the grams or right after quantity perceived. It could be anywhere in this spread, but if you're looking for special prep, please make sure to choose the right one at the end. As you come down, you'll see again the same formula summary, total ingredients, total grams entered, total amount received, and then a subtotal. Here is the preparation space, right? How do you actually want these folks to cook their herbs? Are they single boiling? Are they double boiling? Are they soaking? Are they pre-boiling? What's happening? In this case, we have some pre-created template here, the standard double boil, that'll walk people through the sort of classic Chinese double boil process. And you can just load those right there. You can type your own. You can also type your own and save it. So you have your own template that can live in here. Additionally, because we tagged an herb with at the end short boil, it's asking like, well, what do you want the person to do with that? It's going to get tagged at the end, but do you want them to boil at the end of cooking other herbs for 5 minutes? Or do you want them to do it for 10 minutes? Do you want them to cook it separately and add it in? You can tell them whatever you want. And again, you can save those templates here. And so that instruction will also make its way to the patient so that everything is very clear about what you want them to do. In the next section, you can see add-on services. Different builders have different add-on services. And so the two significant ones here are special packaging requests that we get from people from time to time and Powder. So let's take packaging first. Sometimes people want these herbs packaged in tea bags, right? Or maybe they want a bunch of different herbs, not put together as a formula, but packaged individually. So I had 6 different herbs and I wanted a bag of Huang Qi and a bag of Guizhi and a bag of Baishao. If that's the case, you check this box and we would do that for you. And you can see there's various fees for these various choices. And these fees primarily reflect the added labor that it takes in order to manage packaging of special variety. Otherwise, if you're packaging stuff in the usual, bag of herbs for a certain number of days, and that those bags are less than 11, so 1 through 10 bags, no special packaging. But if it gets beyond that, you'll have added fees for packaging herbs up in more bags. Additionally, the other thing that's really great about doing bulk is that you have the opportunity to powder your herbs. So currently we offer the ability to dry fry, salt fry, and wine fry a particular herb. So let's say for whatever reason you wanted to salt fry I'm not sure the dots out. I don't know why you would want to do that particularly, but let's say you did in this formula. You'd click salt fry here, so we know we're adding that in. And you can see here when I hover over it, it says, this powder is designed to drive the action of an herb to the deep yin and kidney layer. Write the names of the herbs you want salt fried in the notes for medicinary section at the bottom of this screen. And so when you scroll down later, we're going to add in which herbs we wanted salt fried. Refills function the same on every builder, so you can set the number of refills, the days between refills, and the total number of days before this formula expires. Remember, if this is 0, a patient can order more than 1 refill at a time, but if it's a number, they have to wait that number of days before they can order it. Here is markup. Remember, markup gives you the opportunity to add a fixed amount, $4, for example, or maybe a percentage. The patient won't be able to see your markup. We'll collect it on your behalf. And once it hits a certain dollar value, you can request it to be cashed out to you, and we direct deposit it through QuickBooks. Again, this isn't visible to the patient. They'll just see the final price, but you can see it and adjust it as needed. And like everything in the system, you can set it up with a default in your settings. Here we see a summary now. So we've got our ingredients. We've got our salt fry add-on, which gives us a total for the formula at $25.45 plus the markup of $4. And so the patient would see this price at $29.45. Here's our instructions for dispensary or instructions for medicinary. This is where you would tell us, please salt fry the datzao, right? Or whatever it is. The wine fry, the dry fry, what have you. You just need to let us know what herb it is you want us to actually do that for, and we'll make sure to do it before it goes in the bag. Please keep in mind that any information you type here is visible to the patient because it goes on the info sheets that we use to fill the formulas. If you want to give us private notes, something that you just want the medicinary staff to be able to see, there's an order notes option during checkout that we'll look out later in the system. Okay. And then at that point, you'd click add to cart, up, and it gives us this error, very common. Formula name is required. You can't push a formula through the system without a formula name. Okay. And so you got to give it some option to stick it in here. So we'll scroll back down to the bottom and we'll click add to cart. And now we've got our bulk formula added into the cart. Now, I mentioned at the top that there's two different types of ways you can do the math. The other is to just do the math by bag instead of by day. So by day, again, is far more common. It's how formulas are written classically. It's how you'll find them in the Materia Medica books. But some people want to write their formula by bag. They've got a recipe or a formula that has a fixed quantity. Or maybe they're giving the patient a bag of herbs and maybe it will last for 1 day or maybe 3 days. It just kind of depends on how much of it the patient will take, but depending on how they feel. In that case, when everything else is the same, right? You still want to tell us like, okay, well, how many bags of this do you want? I guess probably 3 bags, maybe let's say 4 bags. And we think that each bag is good for 2 days, right? So in this case, we're dosing by bag. So the system's going to do the math here off of the number of bags instead of off of the number of days like we just did a second ago. So when I come down here to write my formula, if I write my formula just like I did before, right? And I come in here and I put in these same values, the things that I was thinking of as a daily value, because that's how I usually think about my formulas. If I type those numbers in here, the system is thinking to itself, well, this is how much herb is going in one bag, right? This is the maximum amount of herb that's going into one bag. And then the practitioner has said that they want 4 bags of it. And so you can see that we're going to end up weighing out 48 grams total and putting 12 in a bag for each of these. And you end up with 4 bags. But that means that this is the total amount at a time that the patient has in a bag. So if you're thinking like, well, I want this to last for 1 day, 3 days, 5 days, make sure that you're adjusting this dosage to accommodate how long you think you want that bag to last. So this is why I think it's easier to write formulas on the by day function, but you can always do it by bag, right? So just keep that in mind that that's an option as well. All right, now that we've got these two guys in the cart, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the next builder system, which is called the bulk powder system. All right, so let's go ahead and build a bulk and powder. So again, we're still working with bulk herbs. We're going to click the bulk and powder builder. The bulk and powder builder is very, very similar, almost identically similar to the granule builder, which is to say that it uses a similar math function. That's very important to keep in mind, right? So we are concerned in this builder by building out a formula that thinks and does math using dosage per day, just like with granules. How many grams of this formula do you want the patient to take in a day? So we're going to give it another test formula here. So we're going to call it test wager 2. And we're going to come down here and we've got all this set up, bulk and powder. You can see here that we're working in bulk and bulk premix and also granule. Why would granule be included in the bulk and powder mix? Well, the reason is because there are some ingredients like shishin, for example, that many people would prefer to use the granule version in a powder as opposed to the bulk version because people are concerned about aristochloric acid. Also, there are some herbs, particularly animal products, that we can't really get in bulk anymore that you might still want to include in a formula. Let's say the xuanxie, the scorpion, or centipede, or some of the other animal ingredients. Sometimes we have them in bulk, but sometimes we don't. And so we've included those as a granule option. Now we'll take a look at what that looks like when you build it out. This total herb quantity amount, this 100 grams, is being generated just like with granules from this dosage calculation. So remember, we're writing a powder bulk formula thinking about dosage by day. So how much powder do we want the patient to take? As you can see here, standard SAN dosage is usually somewhere between 30 and 50 grams a day. So we've built the system currently to show 15 grams twice a day for 7 days, right? That total amount is 210 grams. So this is creating this math based off of this calculation. So if I come in here and I say like, okay, I want them to take 18 grams twice a day for 10 days, and I click off of this, you're going to see that now it knows that this is 360 grams and it's automatically calculating the value at 360 grams is what I'm going to need. Again, exactly like the granule builder. So question one, when writing a bulk in powder, either as a SAN or as a topical or as something you want a patient to make into honey pills, how much herb do you want them to have per day in grams total of the whole formula? And so in this case, we're doing, let's just keep it at the standard of, 15 grams twice a day for 10 days. That's 300 grams. That's 30 grams per day. That's great. So we'll come down here and we're going to say, all right, let's go ahead and build out our formula as we have been, right? So we've got Guizhou, we've got Baishao, we've got Daocao, and we've got Zhigancao. Remember, we don't have Shengzheng. Shengzheng's a fresh herb, so that's not going to be possible to put into a Guizhou powder. They would have to just add it themselves in the end. And so we're going to put in these numbers. Now, where am I coming up with these numbers again? Well, just like with the granule builder, we're just picking the standard daily dose, whatever it is that I would write for a person for 1 day in bulk. Those are the numbers that I'm going to use. And the system will then take these numbers and treat them as ratios, where the 12 to 12 to 6 to 9. So you can see here that in however much formula I had, be it 5 grams, 100 grams, or 5,000 grams, Guizhou would be 30.8% of that formula. Baishao would be 30.8% of that formula. Daocao would be 15.4, and Zhigancao would be 23.1. That would be the deal, right? And so then the system will calculate these real numbers. Now, where do these numbers come from? Well, that's 30.8% of 300 grams, right? Gives me 92 grams. And that's how the system does the math. And so even though I only wrote 12, 12, 6, and 9, the system knows that I need 300 grams because that's what I told it at the beginning. And so it's going to spit out a total of as close as it can be in whole numbers to 300 grams. So 299 in this case. Sometimes it might be 299 or it might be 301. It'll just depend on exactly these numbers because the system is showing you whole numbers, but there's some decimal math that's involved here. We obviously can't easily weigh out a fractional amount of Baishao or Daocao in bulk, and so everything's whole numbers. Whereas in granules, they have decimal places, right? Because you have more flexibility there. So just like with the granule builder, it's going to spit out the total grams for each of these herbs in the formula, showing you the price per gram, the subtotal for that whole line. And then, of course, if you were to scroll, take a look at the subtotal here, you can see 2111. Just like before, we've got a formula summary, and just like before, you could have prep details. So some of our practitioners who write formulas like this will have standard instructions that say, add powder to thermos, cover with boiling water, let steep overnight, something like that. Um, and then, of course, you have the choice of how finely ground you want those herbs. If you're writing a bulk formula in powder that's primarily to be a san, right, something in the san method, coarser grind is what we recommend. It's relatively strainable. It's the most common version for sans. For a finer grind, this is if you want people to actually drink the san powder along with the liquid, you're going to need a finer grind. It doesn't strain nearly as well, though some large particles will strain out. And this is the texture that we use if you want people to make their own honey pills, right? To take these powders and mix them with honey to make classical wands. And then if you're doing something dermatological, then you're going to choose ultra fine grind, right? Which is very, very fine powder, kind of like a baby powder texture that you would use for facial rubs or to put into salves or liquid or oils of some kind. It's very, very fine. It's important to note that ultra fine grinds do have some loss by weight because not everything will be ground to that ultra fine level. So you lose about 10% of the total formula when we grind to this level. Please only choose one type of grind. You can choose multiples here because the system isn't quite sophisticated enough to preclude one over the other, but just choose one type of grind, and that's the one that we'll use for you. You can see here that this has preloaded refill information, and that's because I've set my settings up over here on the left-hand side in the settings section, formula settings, to include refills and markups, so I don't have to type it every time, right? I'd like my stuff to be smooth and simple to use, and so using the settings correctly will get you there more rapidly. So we can now see a summary. Base ingredients 2111. What's this grinding fee? Well, bulk and powder has to be ground. Everything has to be ground. And so no matter what type of grind you choose, the base grinding fee is $5, right? That's always how it's going to start. But if we go to an ultra fine grind, so you can see coarse grind and fine grind are just, there's no added fee. But ultra fine grind does, and it's going to add an extra fee on top of it because there's more labor and rounds that have to go into getting something ultra fine, and so the fees are higher. So we can see here base price, grinding fee, and then the markup that my system is adding. And so the patient will see a total of $34.11 when they look at their invoice. And as usual, if you have instructions about how the medicinary dispensary should prepare that material, you can send that material, that message here, but that is visible to the patient. So please make sure that you're not writing something that you don't want the patient to be able to read. So once everything's in place, we'll add to cart. Oh, we forgot a name again. And we keep doing that because I think it's the most common thing we see where people will get frustrated. And so we just want to make sure that there's a name in here to make sure that everything's in place. All right, so we scroll down to the bottom, save and add to cart. Great. And so now you can see up here in the cart, we've got 3 different things in the cart. It's a quick glance while we're looking at the cart, by the way, that we set a patient for the first one, Kermit the Frog, but we didn't set patients for the others. The system doesn't require that you set a patient, but we strongly recommend that every formula is attached to a patient. And that's because patients will often call us or send us emails and want to know about a formula that they had. And if it's not attached to a patient, if you submit a formula that's not attached to a patient, we won't know that that's what the patient got. We'll look up their name in the system. Maybe they're not even in the system because you didn't add them. And maybe they are, but you didn't attach the formula to them, and now I can't see who that was for. There's ways to look it up that can work if the patient has a lot of information from the info sheets, but it's infinitely easier and more direct if you have all of these formulas associated appropriately with the patient. So if you forget, you can always just do it right here at the end. The last section we want to take a look at is bulk decoction. So bulk decoction is a service that we offer that's only available for in-person pickup in Portland. Unfortunately, the weight and volatility of decoction makes it very difficult to ship, and so we just have it set up for in-person pickup in Portland. So similarly, you'd need to pick a patient, you'd need to type a formula name, and of course, it's a bulk decoction. Dosage in bulk decoction is by day. That's the only way that you can write the dosage, and we'll talk about why. For food safety reasons, decoction service can only cook a maximum of 7 days of herbs in a single order. So you have some choices here that cannot exceed 7. Or how many days of this formula do you want it to be? 3 days. Great. In that case, you'd write the formula just like you did before, right? So you can put in whatever ingredients you want here. And you can see in this column set, the special prep is right next door. So it's actually in front of the granule set, or excuse me, the gram quantity. All of these columns can be adjusted in your settings, where they fall, which ones you can see, etc. So just keep that in mind about what might be here or not here, depending on what you're going to write in. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and just do a quick little just Guager Baishao formula. We've got 2 ingredients in here. And we can see that, they're half and half of the formula. And so it's actually going to spit out 36 grams of each. Why? Why 36 grams of each? Well, it's because we are cooking this formula for 3 days. So this is 3 times 12 is 36. So all of this is going to go in the pot together. If you choose short boil, though, like we have on Guager, then we're just going to cook the baishao and we're going to add the Guager in the end. Root and Branch has some great details on the website about our decoction service, but the short version is that we put the herbs in a pot, an instant pot, and we use pressure and heat to cook those herbs efficiently. And that every day of herbs, so 1 day of herbs, is going to come with 16 ounces of finished decoction. So that's going to be 8 ounces twice a day. So in this case, the practitioner here, we're choosing 3 days of herbs, And so 3 days of herbs is going to result in three 3 quarts of herbs, right? So that's going to be 8 ounces twice a day for 3 days. Okay. And so that's going to end up with a total of 48 ounces of finished liquid. So if you're wondering, like, wait, that math I wasn't following, it's okay. Just remember, all decoction leaves us at a fixed daily dosage rate of 8 ounces per dose, 2 per day. So no matter what, like if you want your patient to take it in 5 doses, that's totally fine. You just need to divide 16 by 5, which is kind of an annoying number. But you're going to end up with 16 ounces of finished decoction for every day that you choose here in the dropdown. The reason we don't have any variation in that is because it makes it way too difficult to consistently cook bulk formulas. A lot of people don't have a great understanding of what those bulk herbs are actually like, how voluminous they are, how dense they are, how much water they absorb. But we do. And so that's why we've worked it down into a very fixed value. So if you want your patients to, have a lot of liquid or a little liquid or something, then you should write this formula as a bulk and bag and give them very specific instructions on how to cook it at home. If we cook it for the patient, which is very popular among folks who, want the bulk experience, but they don't necessarily want to have to cook it, just pick a number of days and we'll take care of the math on our end. When you write the formula, you're going to write this formula as a 1 day quantity, right? You write the formula, how much bulk do you want them to take in 1 day, and let the system do the math. Just as all the other builders, you've got a formula summary here that shows you your ingredients, your total quantity, the amount that it would actually be, and the cost. And again, in prep details, if you wanted something specific for them to take, like decoction dosage information here, 8 ounces of finished liquid 2 times per day for the listed number of days, great, right? Easy to do, no big deal. Then here, the special prep instructions, these generate automatically. We, by standard, short boil items for 5 minutes. And so that's something that you can choose as an option. It's important to note that in here, you only see short boil and not pre-boil. And that's because we don't pre-boil things when we decoct them ourselves. Because we use the instant pots and we have the high temp and the high pressure, things that normally require extended boiling time, minerals, futsa, renshen, don't, right? Everything can go in at the same time and get cooked at the same time. But if you want something short boiled, particularly something volatile like boha, jinjia, something like that that's got a lot of effervescent quality or some sort of like light chi quality, then you can choose short boil add at the end, and we will be able to do that for you. So that's why there's some limitations in what's available. Just like with all the other builders, you can preset your refills, and this one we have to type them in because we haven't saved those settings. And so you can find them here, and the same with markup. Maybe for this one, we're going to do a 12% markup. So when I scroll down, I'm going to be able to see here that my base ingredients were $5.40. There's a decoction service of $5, standard across all types of decoction, no matter what number of days. $5 is the standard. And then here's my 12% markup. So the patient's going to see a cost of $11.05. As well as all the other builders, if you want to send us instructions specifically to the medicinary/dispensary, you would type that information here. If you want something, particular that you couldn't communicate in the other settings. I want to just remind everyone that most people don't use this box, and that's because the material that we can do for you is communicated by the settings that you choose when building this formula. If there's something you want to do that doesn't appear that you can do because of the settings, you should give us a call or email us first before you submit that formula because it may not be something we can do. Just typing it here in this box doesn't guarantee that we can actually deliver that for you, whatever that specific request may be. And so it's sometimes best if you've never done it before or if it seems unclear that you can do it, that you reach out to us ahead of time. So go ahead and save and add this formula to the cart. And now, of course, we have all the formulas we've worked on in this tutorial in the cart. We've got our granule, we've got our bulk and bag, we've got our bulk and powder, and we've got our bulk decoction. So we're going to just click the checkout button, and that's going to bring us to the standard checkout screen. Now you can see here that the Soothe and Circulate we built has a backorder tag because if you recall or if you watched the Granule section, the Datsao is out of order right now. It's backordered. And so that's being reminded to you here that this formula may not be able to get filled same day if you submit it. So you might want to check with a pharmacy ahead of time. Once you see all the orders, the formulas in the order, then we get to decide what's happening here. Are we shipping this to the patient? If we are, it's going to load addresses. If you don't have addresses for the patient, you can always add a new one or edit it if there's a problem. If they're coming to pick it up, because in this case we have a decoction, remember decoction is only available for pickup in Portland, so maybe they're picking up all these things, right? But I also have multiple patients here. I got Kermit and I got Pippi both in this same order. Kermit and Pippi live in the same house, so it makes sense that they'd be on the same order. But anytime you check out, there's only going to be one transaction that is sent out for the patient to pay, and we'll look at that. So that means that if Kermit and Pippi live in the same house and Kermit is going to pay for the herbs this time, then it's fine. But if Kermit and Pippi are not related or they don't live in the same place and they need to be shipped to different places, then all of Kermit's formulas will need to go into the cart and get checked out, and then all of Pippi's will need to go into the cart and checked out. The fact that the formula is written for a different patient is just a way for the system to keep track of which formula goes with which patient, but the ordering process is its own unique unit. So all four of these formulas are going to be, grouped together in a single order, and one of these two patients is going to be asked to pay for it. So once we've chosen pickup as the methodology, who's going to pick it up, the patient is, and then we have to decide which of these patients is picking it up because we got two of them, right? Well, Kermit's coming to pick it up. And who's paying for it? The vast majority of things that get sent through our medicinary, the patient's going to pay for it, right? So you click this box, and once you do that, it's going to ask you, well, which patient? Because we got two of them in the formula. So Kermit's going to pay for it. And as we scroll down here, this section, order notes, is where you would send a private message to the medicinary. Patient tends to run late. Patient had a question they want to ask you about, something that is direct to the medicinary, but you don't necessarily want the patient to be able to see. This is the spot to write it. This is a private message just to the medicinary. Once you've chosen who will pay, said who it is, any notes if necessary, you can review all the details of your order, the base cost, the markup for it, the amount that they'll see. And then, they're picking it up, so there's no shipping. And in many cases, we don't have taxes because of where the transactions happened. So if you click this button, send text message, then it means that Kermit's going to get a text message to his phone number on file with a link to pay. If you send email, he'll get an email. And if you send both, he'll get both. That will submit the formula to our medicinary. It'll show up in our admin backend. We'll be able to see the order, but it'll show unpaid. And we only make formulas that have been paid. So it's very important that if you submit a formula for your client, let them know, hey, this is something that's been sent to the medicinary, but they're not going to make it till you pay for it. So please make sure to follow the links and pay for it. We hold orders in our system for 10 days, right? So a person can pay for their order within 10 days. If they don't, we're going to cancel that order to get it off of our docket so we can keep working with orders that are coming in. A patient can always reactivate an order that was canceled. They get a notification when that happens that lets them know they can do that. They just need to call us, right? But a lot of times, practitioners will submit formulas that they don't really expect that the patient's going to pay for or buy. And I would caution you against that. I think it ends up spamming people with information and cluttering their inboxes or text messages, which means when you do want them to actually buy something, they tend to miss it or ignore it. And it ends up cluttering up the admin section of our workflow as well with orders that are sort of lingering unpaid. So a strong recommendation that if you submit an order, it's with the expectation that the patient is going to buy that order within the next 10 days. If not, you can always just save it inside of your account and then submit it when they're ready to pay for it. So that way there's a closer link between your work, the submission, their payment, and then them receiving the herbs. Obviously, you can do it however you like. But that's our strong recommendation for improving patient compliance with paying for herbs so that they'll actually get the herbs and then, of course, hopefully feel better. So I'm not going to click these buttons here because these numbers are all my phone number and I don't want to spam myself with a bunch of messages and tags. But once you click this, you'll get a confirmation screen that the message has been sent and then you're all done. The card is clear and empty. Assuming, though, that you didn't finish it and you're like, actually, you know what? I need to make some changes. You can always go back to your cart and make changes to any of these particular formulas, remove them, turn off refills, modify the markup. You can do quite a lot of work just from the cart itself. So hopefully that gives you guys a walkthrough of the new updates in the system and the ways to use each of the builders. We'll have more information coming out over the next couple of weeks about added features inside the system that you can watch videos on and read about. But we just wanted to make sure it was all in one place for you so you could find the information that you needed if you were looking at the new system and wondering, hey, what changed here and what works and what doesn't work. Thanks so much for your time, guys, and we'll talk to you next time.